To welcome you all here today. I'm Deborah Chi. I'm the former president of Connect, Korea National Enterprise for Clinical Trial, and at the moment I'm a freelance consultant to biotech companies. I'm very honored today to chair this seminar and to moderate the panel discussion with the distinguished speakers and panels from different embassies in Korea and trade and investment organizations. All countries are facing challenges due to COVID-19, and some industries are severely impacted by the pandemic. However, bioindustry is getting more and more attention than ever before, and international cooperation to expedite and to advance innovation in prevention and the treatment of serious disease become more important. Korea is regarded as an established market for biopharmaceutical products with a relatively high level of price and reimbursement control, but it shows steady growth. The Korean biotechnology sector has shown remarkable growth in its number of competent companies with a wide variety of technology. In this sense, it is very timely that the Korea Bio holds this kind of seminar and discussion with the key person in European and Australia, European countries and Australia. Today we will have two sessions. In the first session, four speakers from five speakers from Belgium, Australia, Germany, and France will talk about each country's initiative to promote bioindustry and its international cooperation together with its response to COVID-19 pandemic situation. In the second session, we will discuss panels from the countries based on questions we've collected in advance from the Korean companies. Due to time constraint, we will not have a separate Q&A session, but I hope you can reserve your questions during our panel discussions, and also you will get the contact details of individual panels and speakers from Korea Bio. Then let's start the first session. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, as a start, I wish to thank the organizer of this seminar, the Korea Biotechnology Industry Organization, for giving us the opportunity to explain the investment trends in the life science industry in Belgium since the COVID pandemic, as well as our investment support policies. Us, that is Mark de Westele, who is sitting on my right-hand side, who is Trade Commissioner at my embassy, and myself, the Ambassador of Belgium to the Republic of Korea. Mark will explain you both subjects in detail. I will limit myself to some general remarks. The life sciences industry is flourishing in Belgium. From young startups to established local firms and multinationals, indeed, the entire value chain, from research and discovery to development and commercialization, is present in Belgium. Thanks to fertile collaboration between biotech, medtech, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare, Belgium offers a unique life sciences ecosystem that is underpinned by a supportive government. Education in life sciences and biotech is world-class and internationally oriented. You do not even have to go to Belgium to get a first-hand experience of this. A Belgian university is forming here in Korea bioengineers in a growing number every year. The Ghent University is the only European university with its own campus in the global campus of Songdo. In an interview with the Jung and Daily a few months ago, the former president So Jong-sun of the Korea Biotechnology Industry Organization remarked that the real future of the bioindustry lays not as much in drug development, but rather in merging big data and medical services. Korean companies looking for investment opportunities in Europe should be aware of the fact that Belgium is very strong in using digital technology for businesses. Belgium is indeed the best performing among the EU member states with respect to electronic information sharing and the use of cloud and data. Future-oriented Korean biotech companies looking for data scientists who have knowledge in life science should look no further. They are sure to find them in Belgium. Belgium is known worldwide as one of the most important research and production centers for the pharmaceutical sector. No wonder that Belgium is playing a significant role in the development of medicines and vaccines to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. This would not have been possible without a close cooperation between the government, the biotech and pharma sector, which predates the pandemic. In 2005 already, government and industry created a dialogue platform, the Research and Development Bio Platform. The frequent meetings of the Research and Development Bio Platform, presided by the Prime Minister of Belgium, proved a valuable asset to ready ourselves for the fight against COVID-19. Next step will be the launch of a Belgian unit for combating infectious diseases, unique in Europe. It will enable companies to perform phase 1 clinical studies and human challenge clinical studies in an optimal regulatory environment. The 40 million euro needed for this unit will be financed via a public-private partnership. In a few minutes from now, Mark will show you in his presentation how important the role of Belgium is in the distribution of vaccines that are produced in Europe and are sent all over the world. Take, for example, the successful mass vaccination in Israel, which has a population of 9 million. Well, most of the doses with which Israel embarked on its vaccination program were sent from Belgium. And for the month of February until the 11th of March, over 500,000 vaccine doses were already sent from Belgium to the Republic of Korea. Cooperation in the life science sector between Belgium and Korea is strong and growing. Mark will give you details in a moment, but let me just give you an idea of our bilateral trade in life science sector products. In 10 years' time, from 2010 till 2020, our bilateral trade in life sciences industry has grown with 419%. We see a healthy growth in both directions. We export, but we also import a growing number of semi-finished products to and from Korea, an indication that the role of Belgium in the value chain of the Korean life science industry is growing. This year, Belgium and Korea celebrate 120 years of diplomatic relations. Indeed, on March 23rd, 1901, the first treaty between the Kingdom of Belgium and the then Korean Empire under the Joseon dynasty was signed. Despite the COVID restrictions, I am committed to make it a year of intensive cooperation between Belgium and Korea in the economic, academic and cultural field. I am confident that our cooperation is continuing on its path to a bright and mutually advantageous future. I hope you will pick up many useful ideas from this seminar, and I look forward to meet you in the future and to hear your stories of successful cooperation with your partners in Belgium. Thank you for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Ambassador Peter Lescuyer. I will introduce the speaker from Belgium, Mr. Mark de Vestel, the Counselor for Trade and Investment from the Embassy of Belgium in Korea. Please welcome Mr. Vestel.
감사합니다. 한국말 잘 못합니다. 그래서 오늘 영어로 말하겠습니다. 감사합니다. And today I want to answer 3 questions with you. First, what has been the impact of Corona on life science industry in Belgium? And then also, what has been the impact of the pandemic on investment in Belgium? And also, what are the advantages that foreign companies use in Belgium. So the first one, what is the impact of the pandemic on the life science industry in Belgium? Here you see an overview of vaccines that have been purchased by the European Union. And you see different vaccine manufacturing companies. And you also see the number of doses that the European Union bought from these different companies. And now I want to see what is the role of Belgium in the supply chain of those vaccines. First, you have the Pfizer vaccine with BioNTech. And then you see that one of the 4 factories in the world is located in Belgium. And also, CureVac vaccine, actually, Gsk factory in Belgium is also producing for CureVac. And if we look at AstraZeneca vaccine, Thermo Fisher factory in Belgium is now producing active substance for the AstraZeneca vaccine. And Moderna vaccine, as you know, Moderna asked the Swiss company Lonza to produce the Moderna vaccine for Europe. And Lonza set up a European distribution center in Belgium. And from that European distribution center in Belgium, the Moderna vaccine will be distributed to 27 EU member states. And we can also look, of course, at the Sanofi Gsk vaccine. Gsk factory in Belgium is producing 1 billion doses of adjuvant for their vaccine. But they are also producing for Canadian vaccine. And also in Gsk Belgium, there is 9,000 people who work, and even Korean people work at Gsk in Belgium. We can also look at Johnson & Johnson. Janssen is part of the Johnson & Johnson group, and the R&D platform of Janssen was used to make the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. 1,800 people work at the Janssen R&D center in Belgium. But there is not only the vaccines that have been purchased by the European Union, there are also other vaccines. For example, the Inovio vaccine. And the Inovio vaccine also, the Belgian company Eurogentech was selected as one of the manufacturing plants for making the Inovio vaccine. So we can say that Belgium is involved in R&D, in manufacturing, and also in logistics of the COVID-19 vaccines. Therefore, we can say that the impact of the COVID pandemic on the Belgian life science industry has been very big. Also, the WHO selected Liège Airport in Belgium as one of the global hubs to combat the COVID pandemic. And Liège is an interesting place because it's not only an airport, but there's also railways, and there's also inland port for ships. And this is, for example, one of the reasons that German company Kühne + Nagel set up a warehouse in Liège for pharmaceuticals. From Liège Airport, the United Nations will organize relief operations to the whole world. So what has been the impact of the COVID pandemic on investment trends in the Belgian life science industry? Here you see an overview of recent investments that have been made. And if I take the first line, you will see the company Universals. And Korea Investment Partners, for example, they participated in a Series C funding of Universals, together with Bill Gates and George Soros from the USA. That is why I put American flag next to the Korean flag. Universals is making units that are used for vaccine production and also can be very easily deployed and makes vaccine production cheap. That is why Bill Gates is also so much interested. And we can also take other examples. For example, Immune Experts was bought by Canadian company Nexalis. Immune Experts makes it possible to select which drug you will launch in a clinical trial, so that the best drug, which has the best potential, be selected for the trial. Also, we can look, for example, at Henogen. Henogen is a spin-off from the University of ULB. It was in Brussels. It was created about 20 years ago, and now Thermo Fisher acquired that company. And also, of course, Delphi Genetics, which makes COVID therapy based on genetic engineering, was bought by Catalent. On the left column, on the left side of the slide, you see the year of the transaction. And we are today only in the month of March. But you already see 3 investments that are being made in 2021. So that's a lot for a small country like Belgium. Therefore, I think that the corona pandemic has accelerated the investment in the life science industry. So why so much investment has happened? Actually, the common denominator of all the investments from the previous slides is that most of those companies are busy with gene and cell therapy. And as you know, gene and cell therapy can be used for the mRNA-based vaccine, COVID vaccine. But gene and cell therapies can also be used, for example, for combating cancer or for orphan diseases. And we are lucky because we have a lot of gene and cell therapy companies in the Wallonia region of Belgium. And all the investments that you have seen in the previous slides, they all happened in the Wallonia region of Belgium. These are other investments that were recently announced. For example, just this week, GSK announced they will invest another 300 million euros in their facilities in Belgium. That's on top of the 600 million euros they already decided 2 years ago. And also UCB, the well-known company UCB, is building new facilities, 300 million investment in Belgium, in Wallonia actually. So where is Wallonia? Here you see a chart of Europe, and the little red triangle is the south of Belgium, and this is what we call Wallonia. And you will see the green dots on the chart. These are major pharmaceutical operations in Europe. And you see that many are located in this red triangle called Wallonia. By the way, the red is about the trucking time. So if you have like a light red color, it means 4 hours trucking time from Wallonia to that place. And then what are the advantages that foreign companies use when they operate in Belgium? I would say the first advantage could be that it's the ecosystem, which means we have many companies in a small area and across the full supply chain, value chain. It goes from R&D, clinical trials, to manufacturing, to logistics and distribution. And you know, Belgium is a small country. We are about 20% of the population of Korea, and we are about 30% of the size of Korea. But still, because Belgium is a member of the European Union, we have access to 460 million people, which is the European market. As you know, the European market is the 3rd biggest market in the world, after China and after India. So here you see a map again where you see Belgium and you see triangles. On the right side, you see a yellow triangle. And if you look well, the triangle connects in the south, Paris, in the north, Amsterdam, and on the right side, it is Frankfurt. So these are 3 important airports. Actually, the total European air cargo, about more than 60% of the European air cargo is happening within that yellow triangle. If you add the airport of London, you have the green triangle and the yellow triangle together, totally it is more than 70% of the air cargo which is being done in this area, and Belgium is in the middle of it. This makes it very efficient for logistics. And one of the organizations, for example, is BioLock Europe. They can help to study about your supply chain. This is also why the US company Baxter, for example, established European Distribution Center in Belgium. And this is a field trip of the Korea World Class 300 organization in 2018, and they were on a benchmark tour. And one of the sites that they visited was the Baxter European Distribution Center in Wallonia. Actually, World Class 300 is a Korean organization with high potential companies. So we were very grateful for their visit. And also another reason of the Belgium success is that the clinical trials are very fast. For example, during the COVID, normally it takes about 14 days to start a clinical trial in Belgium. But because of the COVID, our agency, the Federal Agency for Medicine and Health Products, they shortened the time for approval for clinical trials of COVID vaccines to 4 days. 4 days, very short. And there are also other reasons which are more like financial reasons. Actually, in Belgium, there's two types of incentives. One incentive is from the national government, for example, from the Belgian Ministry of Finance. And other incentives are given by the regions. And as you know, there are different regions in Belgium. One of them is Wallonia, the other one is Brussels, and then there's also Flanders. So you can combine, you can make a combination of incentives from the national government and from the regional government. And when you make a combination of those incentives, you really get a very interesting package for your company. So one of the incentives for R&D is, for example, the low payroll tax on researchers. If you're a researcher, your employer, so the company for which you work, will pay a lower payroll tax. But also, for example, the revenue from your intellectual property, the tax is very low. And also, you get a tax credit on the investments that you make in research facilities. For example, you build a new laboratory, you will get a tax credit. Also, foreign companies use Belgium for their distribution activities because Belgium also offers the opportunity to delay the VAT that you have to pay as a company when you import goods into the European Union. But there's different systems that makes that you can improve your cash flow. And it's also, by the way, possible to operate a European distribution center in Belgium, but to have other warehouses all around Europe, and to say, okay, I will say that my Belgium European distribution center is the main one of the network, and that's a center, they can do all the compliance work also for your other distribution centers in Europe. So if we go, these are all national measures. If we go look at regional measures, we can look, for example, at the Wallonia region, and they offer different incentives which are grants or which are loans. And they can be very important. For example, it goes from 100,000 euro to several millions, depending on the project. And it depends on the stage of your project. For example, if you really start with a new idea, with something totally new, you will get a grant. And then if you are close to market, let's say your innovation can be marketed within 12 months, then the Wallonia region will also provide to you a loan. And it's possible that you don't even have to reimburse the loan. For example, if you decide at the end of your research, well, by the end, I will not put it on the market. For some reasons, I will not put it on the market. In that case, the Wallonia region will become the owner of the innovation that you made. So there's also the land, which is not very expensive compared to other places in Europe. We already, as an office here in Seoul in the Belgian Embassy, we already helped Korean companies to approach the European market. So feel free to contact our office for any reason. Actually, in the Belgian Embassy, there are two trade offices. One is called the AWEX Trade Office, and the other one is called the FIT Trade Office. The one is managed by the Wallonia region, and the other one is managed by the Flanders region. The reason that there are two offices in the Embassy of Belgium is that Korea is so important. So because Korea is important, we have two offices, two trade offices in the embassy. But if you want to just have exchange about how to work in Europe, we are always willing to help you, and also our Korean staff in the embassy speaks Korean much better than me, and they will be very helpful to you, we hope. So we look forward to meeting you. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Peter Lescuyer. Yeah. I have heard about very good things about Belgian clinical trials, but I found that there is a more attractive thing. I like the payroll reduction by 80%. That's very impressive. I would like to introduce the next speaker, Ms. Julie Quinn, who is the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, Australian Trade and Investment Commission. She will talk about the Australia's post-COVID-19 investment opportunities. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chi, for the introduction, and I am very pleased to be here in such esteemed company with Europe and speaking to the Korean bio industry. This is a very auspicious year for Australia. Whilst Belgium has doubled the amount of time it's had relations with Korea, Australia is very proud to be marking 60 years of diplomatic relations with Korea this year. Our two countries have forged a strong relationship over the years, built on complementary interests. Australia has been supplying resources to secure food and to power Korea's industries. And in return, Korea has been exporting its cars and other manufactured products to Australia. Korea is a very important trading partner for Australia. This is our third largest export market and Australia's fourth largest two-way trading partner. So as we celebrate this 60th anniversary, Australia and Korea have a great opportunity to strengthen bilateral cooperation through activity in the biotechnology sector. The skills and global positioning of both countries can only strengthen the work that we're doing together. And we're both very well positioned in the Asia-Pacific region to do that. We already have very good relationships with the biotech industry in Korea, forged over the last 10 years or so, with many reciprocal visits to our respective trade events. Today I will be speaking to you about the COVID situation in Australia and how we're managing it and investment opportunities going forward, as well as how the Australian Trade Commission can support you. So I've done a comparison here because both Korea and Australia are known globally for having managed the pandemic extremely well. We've had different approaches, to be sure, but I think it's fair that we are both being held up as examples of how to manage this pandemic. On the bottom line, you will see that our population in Australia is about half that of Korea. The land mass of Australia is many times larger. We have a lot of space. But if you look at some of the numbers, I think there's a lot of similarities. So I think the per capita, sadly the loss of life is fairly similar and fairly low compared to other countries. Australia's had about a third of the number of cases. One of the big differences you'll see is locally acquired cases are virtually zero at the moment in Australia, but the cases from overseas arrivals is fairly similar. So we're both challenged by the same border issues. So I think there are 4 reasons why Australia has done very well. I mean, one obvious advantage we have is that we're an island nation, and so it's been fairly easy for us to close borders. But also from the very, very beginning, our government was taking expert medical advice and making decisions based on expert advice. We introduced mandatory quarantine. There was rapid adoption of social distancing. Mask wearing wasn't common in Australia like it is in Asia before COVID-19, but people soon realised that that was a very important measure for them. Another very big factor in our management of COVID-19 was the rapid expansion of telehealth. We're a big country and very dispersed population. Australia has actually been a pioneer in telehealth for many, many years, but there's been a real expansion through COVID, including reimbursement allowed for many items. In terms of our science and biotech response to COVID, we've done extremely well. The Peter Doherty Institute of Immunology and Infection in Melbourne was actually the first outside of China to characterise and grow the virus. The institute is named after a Nobel Prize winner, Peter Doherty, who is still very much engaged in that research. Australia has, many of you will know that Australia is a really ideal location for particularly phase 1 clinical trials, and I believe we have, through our various CROs, conducted at least 7 trials in Australia of COVID vaccines from a number of providers from around Australia. We have several vaccine candidates of our own. There was one very hopeful one which was actually supported by CEPI. We've been involved with CEPI for many years. Sadly, that had to be suspended for some time. I'd like to think it might come back. And there are some others in very early stages of development. We also have a company called Illum, who was the first to receive FDA approval for an at-home diagnostic test for COVID-19. And the Australian government has committed to the COVAX facility. We provide aid to a number of countries in the Pacific region, and that has been expanded recently with the Quad dialogue. In terms of economic recovery, well, I think like every country, we all are depending on access to safe and effective vaccines and their delivery in a very prompt manner before we can open borders and encourage travel. But in terms of our GDP, according to our Reserve Bank, we expect GDP and employment to return to their pre-pandemic levels at about mid this year, and then growth of about 3.5% for the next couple of years after a 2% decline last year. In terms of, sorry, I'm struggling to see here. We are predicting, I think as Belgium has, for really renewed interest in investment in biotech and life sciences in Australia in 21 for a number of reasons. And as our Chief Scientist of Australia says, that really science is going to really give rise to a post-pandemic manufacturing boom that we look forward to in Australia. So where are some of the opportunities post-COVID in Australia? So first of all, I think there's going to be a real rise in R&D collaborations and joint ventures in biopharma. It's been quite extraordinary the way companies and governments and universities have come together to respond to COVID. And I think that will actually increase, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that. As Austrade itself is working often with service providers and clinical trials organisations to support activities for Australia around the world. We see M&A trends to build scale. Sorry if I can just come down, to capitalise on COVID-19. I think telehealth is going to be a really important area for us in Australia and digital health solutions. Sorry, I just need that a bit bigger. We have been very active in the life sciences research in cell and gene therapies. I think Korean companies are very aware of our strengths in regenerative medicine in particular through the various conferences over the last number of years. And we really think that those biotechs that are focusing on CAR T, cell therapy, gene therapy, and oncology in particular are going to do extremely well in the coming year or so. And companies that are looking for opportunities to partner will be looking for those that have got strong R&D capabilities and technical expertise. With our telehealth strengths, we also think that digital health is really going to take off, and we're looking forward to really advancing the digital health space, digitech and tech combined with other treatments. So I'd like to just focus a little on the biologics sector. That has been identified as one of the very important subsectors in Australia for investment opportunities. I'm probably telling an audience that already knows this, the global biologics market is very large and growing. I think of the top 10 drugs on the market globally, the large number of them are biologics, including Humira and Keytruda. But of course, Korea has done extremely well in the biosimilar area, and I know that you're snapping at the heels of those biologicals. It's becoming a real growth area for Australian companies, accounting for nearly half of all new patent applications in the space. So we have in Australia a number of SMEs working in this space. Our research institutions are doing incredible work here. We have small-scale specialist manufacturing facilities, and we have multinationals with some R&D capability and manufacturing sites in Australia. So we are very much open for business. We are looking for investors who are keen to come to Australia to support their manufacturing efforts. There is going to be a viral vector facility constructed in New South Wales, and our government there is looking for funding to support that activity, to support the cell and gene therapy area in Australia. There are lots of opportunities, we believe, to partner with the Australian SMEs and researchers to grow the cell and gene therapy area. Digital health is another very important subsector that we see. Australia is really an ideal location in the Asia Pacific as a testbed for developing and testing digital health, especially in an English language market. In some ways, we have a lot of advantages being a long way from everybody, although we're in a very similar time zone to Korea, so it's great working with Korea and Australia together. But if Korean companies are interested in testing their English language products, Australia is the ideal place to do that, and we are very well placed, as I said, with our telehealth history to do that. We also have a very multicultural population, so we're a great testbed market. We're very quick to adapt new technologies. Again, our distance has actually almost forced us to do that. Often we're a long way from each other, so we really have been very fast adopters. And the Australian government has invested significantly in its national My Health records, so the vast majority of Australians are already on a national database. Their data is there, so there's a huge amount of data on that database for health and ripe for opportunities for ongoing research and development. So the future of our health system in digital and data acquisition has really been dramatically accelerated thanks to COVID, and it's part of our fight against that. The Australian government has introduced more than 300 new reimbursement codes. Clinical trials, many of you from Korea will know that Australia is a great place to do clinical trials, and we have some Australian CROs already here in Korea helping you. We offer international partnering opportunities, and great incentives, tax incentives for you to do your clinical trials in Australia. We have a world-class healthcare system, sophisticated infrastructure, an ethnically diverse population, and very importantly, the data is accepted by the major regulatory bodies globally. So if you're wishing to go to Europe and the US, Australian data is well recognised there. We have been strengthening our regulatory requirements, and as I mentioned, we have very strong tax incentives. So at the moment, our R&D tax incentive for businesses who wish to do R&D in Australia are very generous, 43.5% cash rebate for companies with less than $20 million in revenues. And that's not just for clinical trials, that's for any R&D activity in Australia, and a slightly lower amount for companies with revenues less than $20 million. I'd like to talk about some other federal government initiatives. One of them is a fairly new initiative, the Global Innovation and Linkage Program. Excuse me while I just get my notes. Excuse me. Sorry, nearly there. So this is a program to help Australian businesses and researchers collaborate with global partners, and it provides grants between Australian $500,000 and $1 million, which can cover up to 50% of eligible project expenditure. So this money is actually for an Australian organisation collaborating with another Australian entity and at least one global partner. So we'd be very pleased to talk to any of you who are interested in that scheme. More recently, as a post-COVID initiative, the federal government has initiated the Modern Manufacturing Initiative, which is a $1.5 billion initiative to help Australian manufacturers scale, collaborate and commercialise, and also to provide us with some sovereign capability in medical. I think all countries around the world suddenly discovered with COVID that their supply chains were very limited. So our government has put together a manufacturing priority roadmap, and medical products is actually one of the priority areas. This is providing co-funding grants of between $1 million to $20 million, again up to 50% of eligible project expenditure. And it's for businesses with projects to translate research, looking to integrate their products and services into domestic and international value chains. Another initiative, and I should advance the slides at the same time, is a very recent one, and this will be of interest to Korean tech companies. You're very sophisticated and well ahead of us in 5G innovations. Australia is playing catch up, but we have a 5G innovation initiative for medical technology, and there is a current program with grants of up to $2 million to demonstrate the value of 5G technology to businesses in Australia. And we're particularly appealing to digital health companies that are interested in participating in this program. Another very important initiative is a global talent one, where the Australian government is aiming to identify and attract exceptional talent and high-value businesses from around the globe to Australia. So again, health and life science has been identified as one of the priority sectors, and we are looking for highly skilled people who are outstanding in their field, internationally recognised and able to drive innovation. So I'd just like to quickly talk to you about why Australia for R&D. We have a very sophisticated research and environment and healthcare system with top-class universities and education precincts. Our healthcare system has been ranked top in the world in a Commonwealth Fund study, and we have very strong translational research capabilities and commercialisation. We have a very robust regulatory environment. It's a very safe place to do research. We have a top-tier IP regime. We're globally ranked 5th for IP protection, and we have, as I mentioned, those generous R&D tax incentives. Our federal government has a $20 billion medical research future fund, and we're an ideal location for Asia. A slide here just giving you an idea of a couple of things. First of all, our Federation of States, but also some of the health and biotech precincts around Australia. You'll see that in almost all our states and territories we have incredible activities going on in health and biotech research. I should also mention that while I've spoken to you about federal government initiatives, there are a number of state and territory initiatives that we would be happy to talk to you about. And in fact, just today, one of our states, Victoria, has announced a $2 billion research fund. So there is incredible support for health and biotech research in Australia. A bit about the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, or Austrade as it's known. We are Australian Government's trade and investment agency, and we connect businesses around the world. Our office in Seoul has about 18 people, 3 Australians and a number of locally engaged staff who are highly experienced in across the sectors. And the sorts of services that we can provide to you include, very importantly, introductions. That's something we pride ourselves on. We have industry information. We can connect you to supply chains. We know the R&D space. We know the talent and skills, and we can provide referrals. We understand the challenge of investing, and we seek to provide the information that you need to make good decisions and provide a coordinated approach that saves time and money. Just finally, our contact details are there. My colleague Juliet, we will be known to many of you. I think she's a bit of a legend in the biotech industry here in Korea, and I'd be very pleased to speak to you in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie, for your excellent presentation. I think the Korean companies will like the Global Innovation Linkage Program and your R&D refundable tax very much. So we will talk in detail later. So I will introduce the next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Gregor Kemper, who is the project manager biotechnology of Germany Trade and Investment. He will present online and will talk about the Germany's pandemic response and biotechnology. Please welcome Dr. Kemper, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Choi, and thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to tune in today remotely. Please allow me to share my slides. Just a second. I hope everyone can see them. Well, thanks again for tuning in. My name is Gregor Kemper. I'm in charge of the biotechnology and biopharmaceutical sector at Germany Trade and Invest. And today I would like to talk about the effect which the coronavirus pandemic had on Germany's biotechnology industry, and especially on investments in this sector. I'd like to talk about 3 subtopics. Firstly, I'm going to talk about private investments. That means investments of the biotech and pharma industry in drug development and biomedical research. Then public initiatives, which steps has the public hand taken in order to foster biotechnology research, and especially in order to promote and accelerate the fight against the coronavirus. And finally, I'm going to show some things that are not unique to biotechnology, not related only to the biotech industry, but that might also be of interest for especially Korean companies that are interested in the location in Germany and instruments that could be helpful and interesting for them. Well, firstly, about the private investments. In order to start us off, I'm going to give a quick rundown of what the German biotechnology sector looked like in numbers pre-COVID. So there are, according to a survey from the German Biotechnology Industry Association, a bit over 820 dedicated biotechnology companies. Please bear in mind that this includes only the companies that are active only in the biotech space. There are also further companies that have, well, activities in biotechnology, but also in other fields. And the workforce in the sector is about 50,000 people. The revenues have been increasing pretty steadily in the past couple of years, so from 3 billion euro to about 4.5 billion euro from 2014 to 18. and so have the R&D investments, which have been steadily increasing, along with the number of companies and the workforce, the employment. Now, how has the COVID pandemic affected the investment in biotechnology and pharma research? First, let's take a look at what the situation looked before in the years from 2016 to 2018, according to information from the European Pharmaceutical Industry Association. Germany was actually one of the few countries where the investment in pharmaceutical research and development has been increasing. Last, it's been around 7.8 billion euro a year. Now, how did the pandemic affect this? There are no, there's no hard data yet, but what I can already show is that according to a survey amongst biotechnology companies that are active in research and development in Germany, more than half of them has stated their intent to augment, to expand their R&D operations in Germany in the future. And this is actually a survey that is carried out by an industry association annually. And if you compare it to the previous year, that's pretty much unchanged. So usually it's about half of the companies that are active in Germany in biotechnology that want to expand their R&D operations. And so this is really not a big change, and it shows that the readiness of German companies to invest in research and development in the pharma space has not really been negatively affected by the pandemic. Of course, you can certainly imagine that pharma and biotech are fields that are generally very research heavy. In Germany, it's over 17% of revenues that are usually reinvested into research and development. Now, how about the financing of companies themselves? I hope you can see that well. The colors are a bit difficult, but on the left, you can see a graph of how things were before in the years leading up to the pandemic. You can see that in the amount of venture capital invested in biotech companies, there has been a bit of an upward trend, and also in IPOs and follow-ups. Generally, it's been going upward. 2018 was a bit of a special year because due to the high capital raise of QIAGEN, the overall sum of follow-up financings of biotechnology companies that are active in Germany was a bit unusually high. Now, what about 2020? I didn't put 2020 on this graph because it's basically off the charts. Due to the sharp increase of interest that the biotechnology industry received due to the pandemic, the investment sums into the sector in Germany were much, much higher than usual. You can see it here, over 924 million euro investment in venture capital, so much more than the about 400 million you had in the last year before, and that was already a record. But what truly made this year unique was 2.1 billion in revenues from IPOs. The most important reason for this being the IPOs from the mRNA vaccine developers BioNTech and CureVac. Both of them went public, and these two IPOs are the main reason why for the German biotechnology industry, 2020 was a year in terms of financing like none before, actually. Oops. Now about public initiatives. I've already mentioned the two mRNA vaccine developers, BioNTech and CureVac, which are also pretty much internationally known. There is actually also a third and less known German company that develops coronavirus vaccine, IDT Biologica and Dessau. And these three have been quite heavily invested by the federal government to accelerate their success in vaccine development. For example, last year, the federal government earmarked a total of 750 million euro to these three companies together in order to accelerate their R&D programs and later their production programs. And also, after rumors about a possible foreign purchase of CureVac, the federal government invested 300 million in the company CureVac, which shows that the involvement of the public hand of the federal government in private companies in the context of this pandemic is actually a bit higher than you expected it to be before. So this is exceptional situation, I suppose, and this also leads to exceptional measures. What also happened, of course, Germany and the European Union in general purchased a lot of vaccines from these and from other companies for the currently running vaccination campaign. And since they were partly, since the vaccine supply was usually paid for in advance, this gave these companies an extra boost to invest in production facilities ahead of approval of their vaccines. Also in 2020, the federal government transferred an extraordinary 140 million euro payment to CPI in order to, not only in Germany, but also on a global scale, further vaccine development. Now, another important element, of course, in the R&D response to the pandemic is fundamental research funding. Now, the reason why, after the outbreak, the German Federal Ministry for Education and Research was able to react rather quickly was that in 2006 already, 3 German ministries teamed up to form a joint initiatives for research on zoonotic diseases. This initiative was then later expanded to a network, and it contained a feature which allowed for the rapid release of funds in case of an infectious emergency in order to issue a call for research applications. This is what happened in 2020, which is why rather quickly financial means were mobilized in order to issue a call for proposals, which was a call for all kinds of research around the pandemic. It could be drug development, it could be biological fundamentals of virus research, or even research on the impact. This call ended in 2020, but a new one has been issued in January this year, again endowed with 50 million euro. And what's special about these calls for proposals from the Federal Ministry for Education and Research is that usually these calls are for non-for-profit organizations only, but this time they were actually aimed at companies as well. So these were actually also opportunities that were of interest for commercial companies. Now, diagnostics, of course, are another important element in the fight against the pandemic. Germany is quite an important location in the development and production of them. For example, Roche at their sites in Penzberg, Bavaria, have developed a rapid and very reliable antigen test last year. Penzberg had been a site where the company had invested a number of times in the past years, also with support of the state of Bavaria, and now this research success shows that this has paid off quite nicely. Of course, since the onset of the pandemic, the demand for diagnostics has been pretty high, but there are reasons to believe it's going to increase even further. Firstly, that's because in February, the sale of antigen tests to the public, so not just to medical professionals, but also to lay people, has been permitted, which might result in, of course, further demand. And also there are plans to potentially offer 2 free tests per week for all residents of Germany. And if you calculate how many that is, and if, as the Ministry for Health assumes, 2 to 2.5% of people might use this offer, that could easily be more than 500,000 of point-of-care diagnostics, point-of-care tests per day. So a huge demand that might be on the horizon. And in order to supply this demand and help supplying this demand, the federal government has earmarked 2 million euro for POC test investment projects. So in order to set up production sites in Germany, these grants can cover up to 30% of eligible cost for the investment and up to 30 million euro per applicant. And there's even an additional bonus for companies that use raw materials that are sourced from the European Union. Now, about as I promised, I'm going to also talk a bit about support for companies that might be generally interesting, not just in the biotech space. For many years, Germany was actually one of the few European countries that did not have a have an instrument to support research and development via tax credit, but this has now changed. Now, starting this year, there is an instrument for companies to receive tax credit for their R&D salary expenses, which can cover 25% of the salaries for R&D, and also 60%, well, 60% of 25% of fees paid to European CROs. Originally, the expenses that could be taken into account for these incentives were capped at 2 million, but now, due to the particular COVID situation, this cap was doubled to 4 million. So salary costs for R&D up to 4 million can be taken into account, and that's not just this year, but until 2026. So this makes the R&D location Germany quite a bit more attractive than it already is. There are also some other initiatives that might be of interest for international companies that are interested in becoming active in Germany. Firstly, there are the regional investment grants, which are the availability of which varies with the region. On the left, you can see a map of Germany, and the darker blue it is, the higher the available regional investments. So in the region where they are available, it means that companies that invest in any kind of facilities, factories, manufacturing plants, whatever, can receive investment grants that may cover usually up to 40% of the invested sum. How much exactly it is depends on the region and on the size of the company. And now just this month, there has actually been an increase in order to support investments now in times of the pandemic. And another thing that could be of interest for you is the support for local pharmaceutical and API production. Since at the beginning of the pandemic, some countries that export a lot of generics, like for example India, put limitations on the export of certain drugs like anti-inflammatories. Many people in Europe got worried about the safety of the supply lines for pretty vital drugs like antibiotics, and this is probably the reason why the federal government has, as part of the economic stimulus package, earmarked 1 billion euro as incentive for the domestic production in Europe of APIs and pharmaceuticals. However, it's not yet known exactly how this money will be used, but it's already sure that there will be instruments to promote pharmaceutical production in Germany or Europe. Now, I've talked about regional development, and what's interesting in this context is also the phenomenon of structural transformation, by which I mean that regions in Germany that were traditionally very much dominated by coal mining or heavy industries or both are now undergoing a transformation towards sustainable business models, and also biotechnology is one of the important industries that's starting to grow there. Some examples are, for example, the Rhineland region, which used to be and actually still is an important coal mining region, but where there has also been a model region established in order to promote the collaboration between industry and academic researchers, building up sustainable business models. Or you have the Lusitania region, which is also still an important lignite mining region, but where now there are some clusters dedicated to white and green biotechnology, and therefore also sustainable models of value creation. Or you have the state of Saxony, where about 20 years ago there has been an initiative to make the state top biotechnology, medical biotechnology location, which has actually paid off. Now this state is one of the leading German states in this field in medical biotechnology. Well, I've talked about regions. Now, of course, I should also talk about clusters. One important aspect of the strength of the German biotech ecosystem are the regional clusters, which are basically regional agglomerations of biotech companies, academic biotech researchers, different stakeholders of the biotech industry, which partly operate, for example, biotechnology parks and provide infrastructure for biotech startups and provide them a favorable environment to grow. Others create links between academic researchers and industry, and some of them are dedicated to any particular industry or scientific area, like, for example, infectious diseases or nanobiotechnology. So this is really a good starting point to find, for example, potential partners in drug development and medical biotechnology in general. We also have a brochure on that, a publication, if you're interested. This could be an interesting starting point to explore Germany. Starting point is a good keyword, because of course Germany Trade and Invest has also other resources to support companies from international companies that are interested in getting involved in Germany and taking part in Germany's largest medical and pharmaceutical market, Europe's largest medical and pharmaceutical market, I'm sorry. We have different information for companies that are interested, like market intelligence, information on regulatory, tax, and financial topics, and practical advice, for example, support in the search for a suitable location in Germany. We have offices all over the world, also one in Seoul. And these are my contact details. If you have any further questions, we'd be happy to help you. Thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to letting me speak here.
Thank you, Dr. Kemper. It was very informative presentation. It seems that the mRNA vaccine is really driving the investment in your biotech space. I will introduce a group of the last speakers from French Embassy in Korea. Ms. Adeline Lees-Koff, the Economic Counselor, Deputy Head of the Economic Department at the French Embassy in Korea. Mr. Jerome Julien, Director of Business France in Korea, Commercial Counselor at the French Embassy in Korea, and lastly, Mr. Frederic Girard, the Vice President of France Biotech. So please welcome these three French speakers to introduce their country investment for biotechnology sector. Please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adeline, and I'm an economic counselor. I'm very glad to meet you. I would like to thank Korea Bio for inviting France to this event and to let us this opportunity to present all the measures taken to shape France as one of the most competitive, innovative health tech hubs in the world. So first, I'm going to tell you about our ecosystem. Since 2017, France has made huge efforts to become more attractive by voting on many pro-business reforms. And these efforts have paid, as France was the first place in Europe for the foreign direct investment in 2019 and showed a pretty good resilience in 2020 despite of the COVID-19 pandemic. And figures will be available at the end of this month. The reasons of this success can be found on this slide. And as you can see, France benefits from great infrastructures, a large market, and qualified manpower with 1 million of engineers, and a strong reforms agenda since 2017, and it goes to 2022. The labor code has been deeply reformed, and some taxes too. Two types of taxes have been targeted by the different reforms. First, corporate taxes have been progressively lowered from 33% in 2017 to 28% today, and it will go to 25% by next year so that it can reach the European average. And the second type of taxes is production taxes. Our French recovery plan, which called France Relance, provides for production tax reduction of 10 billion euros a year for the next 2 years. So in total, 20 billion euros of production tax reduction. The main goal of these measures is to support French competitiveness and French attractivity. These notions are in the core of the recovery plan launched in September in France. So France Relance aims at shaping France of tomorrow. It's 100 billion euros plan, which gives France the means to achieve ambitious goals in all sectors and to have more innovative and competitive industries while promoting a greener and inclusive economy. Hence, our plan is based on the 3 pillars that you can see: green transition, competitiveness, and social and territorial cohesion. Among these 100 billion euros, a significant part will be used to support potential new markets and to invest in our future. As you can see, 1 billion euros will be invested in medical infrastructures, and the 4th French program called Investing in Our Future, PIA in French, will dedicate 20 billion euros for the next 4 years to support the ecosystem of research and innovations. Our ambition is clear, is to become a European leader in health tech by relying on our asset and strength. France is ranked as a leader in terms of access to healthcare, and we are known for our long-term commitment in terms of public and private R&D, and we have the chance to have a strong industrial footprint with national and international champions. And we have planned to invest deeply in training and people, and in R&D, of course. Our strategy will be based on 4 pillars, and we have already talked about medical infrastructures, but we will do our best to secure the value chain and boosting new investments, including health sector, and we'll try to accelerate market access for innovative products with fast-tracked and simplified process, and we will support private and public research. So now I leave the floor to my colleague from Business France, Jean-Julien.
Jerome?
Yes.
Yeah, please start.
Yes. Just trying to put on my mic while changing the slides. Hi everyone, 안녕하세요. I'm Jérôme Julien, Director of Business France in Korea. And now we'll go deeper in the pharmaceutical market in France. I think it's of interest if you are planning an investment to understand that it's a huge market. It's the 2nd market in Europe and the 5th in the world for a population of 67 million people. And it's a huge industry as well, with an innovative and collaborative ecosystem of players in the public and the private sectors. So this market, industry market, generated 60 billion euros in 2019, and it represents more than 3,000 companies and employs 450,000 people. In terms of biotechs, it's 720 biotechs in this field, and they focus mainly on oncology. It's also a very dynamic ecosystem of startups. As you can see, 60 new biotech companies are created every year in France by local French companies, but also foreign companies. The market is huge, as I said in the beginning, and it represents 488 euros per capita in 2018. So the collaborative innovation ecosystem is well implemented in France. We have 4 main research centers that are listed in the top 25 world's most innovative research institution in 2019 by Reuters. The one that we are focusing on is INSERM. It's the 2nd leading medical research institute in the world with more than 15,000 employees and health professionals, and the 1st depositor of patents in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals in Europe in 2018. It helps a lot of research centers all over France with 73 universities, and it achieves a lot of great success, like the 13 Nobel Prizes in medicines that came from France. It's important to understand that more than 50% of the health tech companies that are created in France are spin out from the public or academic research. In terms of a tax credit regarding R&D, had 800 millions of tax credit per year are dedicated to health industry in France. It's almost 12% of the total average of tax credit per year. So it's a huge priority of France, and it's also the first European country in terms of clinical trials. You can see also the clusters in France. If you want to get in touch with them, we can help you. This ecosystem has also a branch in Korea. It's called the French Healthcare Club in Korea. The founding members are the 5 big French companies in health industry. And we have all the institutional members of the French Embassy, but also the French Tech, the Chamber of Commerce, and Institut Pasteur Korea that are a member of this club. We have also 60 active members in terms of company. Some companies are already in Korea or are selling in Korea or intending to come to Korea. So the main goals of this French Healthcare Club are to promote exchanges between France and Korea in the field of healthcare, of course, but also to bring new cooperation and scientific and academic cooperation between our 2 countries. We would like also to promote the Korean healthcare industry investment in France through this club, and also to strengthen the French footprint and visibility of the French offer in Korea. So we are open for collaboration. We have a website you can check if you want. You have the address, and you had my contact details also at the beginning of the presentation, and you can contact me for any collaboration with this club, because I'm co-piloting this club. Now, regarding the bioproduction and the biotechnologies in France, it's quite important to see that we'll go deeper with Dr. Girard afterwards, but it's already a very dynamic sectors in France, and we have strong ambitions regarding biotechs in France. We want to push it. For the moment, we have 32 bioproduction sites in France among the 720 companies that are working on this field in France. And we want to push the turnover to 40 billion euros a year by 2030s. How do we do that? We want to attract and develop disruptive technologies. It comes also for foreign investor, of course. We want to lower the bioproduction cost, which is the key element. We want to create a stronger network of startups and SMEs on these fields. And of course, it's a key and a pillar of the success is to reinforce the training and education in these new technologies. So now I will leave the floor to Dr. Girard from France Biotech, Vice President of France Biotech, but also Vice President of a company, ADB Technologies. Maybe he will speak a little about that as well. Frédéric, the floor is yours, and Adeline will pass on your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Julien. We'll invite Mr. Frédéric Girard for the next presentation from French Embassy. Mr. Girard, are you connected? Could you turn on your microphones? Turn down your mute?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and sorry for that technical issue. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak this morning at this conference. I am Frédéric Girard. I'm the Vice President of France Biotech, and I'm going to speak a bit of France Biotech just later. I'm also the Senior Vice President of DBV Technology, which is a French biotech company at the stage of registration. And I have also the pleasure to run the healthcare committee at the Council of Foreign Trade in France. So can I ask the slide to be shared, or do you wish I do it?
Yes, please.
So then I'm going to share the slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So Jérôme was mentioning about the collaborative spirit in the French health tech industry. This is exactly how France Biotech is working. We are gathering 350 health tech companies in our association. The objective is really to help them developing their product and becoming international leader. So we really see the way of working by connecting the people to each other and helping each other. We have 9 committees and 3 working groups where people are exchanging experience and also meeting experts to help them in the different dimension, of developing their company. We are also closely working with the government, advising the government on the different measures that needs to be implemented to support the development of the ecosystem. And I can tell you that we are receiving a very high attention from the government at this point in time. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the health tech sector is a very dynamic sector in France. We have over 2,000 health tech companies, both in biotech and medtech field, but also a very dynamic ecosystem for e-health. These are quite young companies, 8 years of age, relatively small, 22 employees, with CEO coming from the scientific and medical sphere. It's also very dynamic because you see that we have something like 60 new companies being created every year. So they mainly focus on human therapeutic, mainly oncology, infectious disease, and CNS, and they have a huge portfolio of 4,000 products in development, including roughly 2,000 biotech products. Next slide, please. So the ecosystem represents today 50,000 direct jobs, mainly in research and development, but also in manufacturing, but also roughly 180,000 indirect jobs, with 85% of our company using subcontracting, mainly in R&D and manufacturing. It's also a very dynamic ecosystem by the intention to recruit, because as you see, 84% of the company, they consider recruiting in 2021. Next slide, please. So those young companies have, quite high ambition to develop partnership at the international level, mainly in Europe, 64% of the company, but also in North America and in some extent in Asia, Korea being the 3rd country by importance for considering developing partnership. They are quite advanced for 1/3 of them, because as you see, they are close to the marketing phase. Next slide, please. So most of the company have developed already partnership, mainly academic partnership, focusing on R&D for 3/4 of them. Most of the partnership are developed in Europe, 1/3 of them in North America, and very few in Asia, which give certainly a space for improvement. Next slide. Next slide. So if we consider about fundraising, you see that this is quite a dynamic space, with 11 billion raised in 2020 in Europe, so growing by 12%. 20% of them raised in venture capital. So you see that France is the 2nd most dynamic country by amount raised between 2018 and 2020. If we focus only on France, you see that 1.5 billion have been raised in 2020, and roughly 1 billion through debt. Next slide. So if we consider now what support measure you will receive if you decide to invest in France, there are 4 measures we wanted to highlight. First, about funding. We have a very active public bank for investment, which is helping company mainly at early stage, but not only, through different tools, including direct investment. And 2 years ago, to support funding for late stage and scale up, several funds have been created called TB Fund, which are supposed to channel 6 billion investment in health tech company. We have also the France Relance Plan that Jérôme just detailed with you. We have also very attractive tax credits. So the first is the Crédit Impôt Recherche that was just described, which allow you to deduct from your tax 30% of your investment in R&D. So, and if you don't pay tax because you are a young company, you can just get the amount in direct payment after some time. We have also the status of young innovative company that give you some very attractive tax advantages. Next slide. So there are also tax advantages regarding the transfer of patent, and also quite unique in Europe. You have the so-called early access program named ETU that is being reformed at this point in time, which allow you to commercialize your innovation under certain conditions, even before registration, and get revenue for that. So that was, I believe, what are the four most interesting support from the government to the biotech company. And of course, if you consider France for an investment, for establishing your European headquarters, France Biotech will be more than happy to exchange with you about what it is about to run a biotech company in France. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Girard. We are just on time, and we will move to the panel discussion right away. So we have four panels for this panel discussion. There's one new face to join us, Mr. Mark de Vestelle from Embassy of Belgium in Korea, who is the economic and commercial attaché. Is he joining from remote? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So good afternoon again. For Korean biopharmaceutical companies, as of 2018, there are already over 200 companies who have that have a presence abroad, and among 200, there are over 330 companies who has a kind of a presence, physical presence in European countries and Australia. So now more and more the Korean companies want to expand globally, and they are keen to know about your support services and the incentives for companies incoming to your countries like Korea. So my first question is to every panel. So you have presented the examples and the good programs for R&D companies with R&D activities. As the summary, could you summarize the services of support or incentives from your government that is eligible, the foreign companies are eligible if they operate in your individual country? I would like Julie to start.
Thank you, Dr. Chi. I think the guests will see in the presentation a number of those, but I think I would like to highlight mostly our R&D tax incentive of 43.5% refundable tax for eligible companies with a turnover of less than 20 million. This is really ideal for SMEs that wish to set up in Australia to take advantage of our clinical trials network and also R&D. A couple of other incentives that I didn't mention in the presentation. There's one called Biomedtech Horizons, another one, Biomedical Translation Bridge, that offer funding of up to $1 million, and they're administered by one of our industry growth centres called MTP Connect. I mentioned many of our states and territories also offer specific incentives that we can let you know about, and there are also opportunities to partner with research institutes through our National Science Grant Program, the Australian Research Council, and also our National Health and Medical Research Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, please.
Thank you very much. I would say that before using incentives, maybe we can look at the different stages of the market approach. And stage number one is, for example, you will want to work with an importer in Europe. And for this, in Belgium, we have importers who are experienced with importing products from Korea. For example, Kogene company from Korea works with an importer in Belgium, which is called Analysis. And then second stage, I would say, is if you want to grow further, you want to develop your own logistics, you can try to work with a third-party logistics company. And in Belgium, we have many third-party logistics companies who work for the life science industry, which are certified with all the certifications that you need in that industry. And then the third step would be like even more serious step is like you create your own company, maybe you even hire people. And there we have a combination of national incentives and regional incentives. And from the national incentive, certainly also the R&D incentives are very good. And from the regional incentives, they are tailor-made. They will really look at your project. There will be a committee that will analyze your project. And then you can, for example, get a grant, which is a major grant, even up to millions, or you can get a loan, and then you have to pay back the loan, or you don't pay back the loan according to the result of your research. But there is also, for example, the clusters, which will help you to network with other companies in your field. And also, for example, our office in Seoul can help you to find a partner, or even in one case, I was looking for a location for a new, like a new warehouse. So there's different incentives. I would say that in all, the supportive environment is maybe interesting to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like Gregor for the same question.
Well, thank you. Yes, actually, as I mentioned, most of the incentives and support instruments that are available in Germany are also relevant for international companies that are interested in becoming active in Germany, because they are either just dependent on where the activity takes place, or also available to German subsidiaries of international companies. So this is the case, for example, for the research tax credit and for the regional development investment grants. So basically, these are instruments that German subsidiaries of international companies can also easily benefit from. What I would like to highlight in particular, and what I didn't mention before, is the ZIM program, ZIM. It's basically a program that is tailored by the Federal Ministry for the Economy to promote innovation in the small and medium enterprises, which play, of course, a very dominant role in the German industrial landscape. And what they do is basically they offer industry-independent research and development grants that are somehow aimed at developing new products and services to small and medium enterprises. They fund both individual development projects and also development networks. And this is where it gets really interesting for Korean companies, because there are bilateral collaborations between the German ZIM and their respective international partner organizations. For example, in Korea, this is KIAT. And this means that there are joint calls for application between the German ZIM and, for example, KIAT. The last call for applications was in 2020, and further calls are planned. So this means that when the next call is issued, Korean companies will have the opportunity to find partners in Germany, apply jointly with them, and then get basically research and development grants for joint Korean-German research projects.
Thank you. Sounds great. Last but not least, France.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chi. Of course, most of the benefit would also benefit to foreign companies, especially if they decide to establish a presence in France. This is true for tax credit on R&D, but also the young innovative company status. Having said that, I think as entrepreneur in biotech, you don't really fund a company by chance. It's also because you want your innovation to be available for patients. And we have, in this regard, a very attractive scheme with the early access program, where you can just make your innovation available to patients even before registration. So it's good to help patients, it's good to bring revenue to the company, but also it's good to collect early real-life data that would be helpful for health economics. Now, it's not all about subvention. You know, it's also about what you could find in France. It's about center of expertise. It's about the quality of the staff, the quality of the life and the safety, and also the collaborative spirit. And we have, I would say, every second week, meeting with the president office directly, you know, where we can find really very strong support to the ecosystem, but also to each individual company. And it was especially the case in the COVID-19 crisis, you know, to make sure that the ecosystem can still develop despite the situation.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the excellent answers. The next questions from Korean companies about clinical trial support. Not only the drug trials, but also the in vitro diagnostic trials, they have difficulties in finding good sites, especially in Europe. Are there any countries who provide the information on patient pool or recruiting sites, and also any the service to access your electronic health record to design the clinical trials in your population? I think it's a kind of a technical question, so I would like to invite Mr. Frederick Gerard and Dr. Greg Kemper to answer. Gregor, would you answer?
Yes, well, in terms of clinical trials, Germany is pretty much one of the European locations where there are most of them. And I think that this is probably also due to the tendency towards orphanization, so an increased focus on rare diseases, drug development in rare diseases, because the rarer the disease, the less patients you can find, and the more important it is to have a large population pool from which to draw and recruit populations in Germany, with by far the largest population of Europe is, of course, such a population pool where even for rare diseases, you can still find enough potential patients to meet your accrual targets. Now, in terms of support, what could be interesting for companies that consider Germany a location for clinical trials is the recent developments in the field of digital health. In Germany, health and healthcare in general is getting more digitized. And this, I suppose, is something that especially clinical trials can benefit from, especially now during the pandemic. This would probably make it easier to organize them also at a multi-center approach and conduct them more efficiently.
Thank you. How about France, Mr. Gerard?
Yeah, so regarding the clinical research, you can get easily now all information for your development in France through the recent creation. It's 1 month ago of a unique contact at the Drug Medicine Agency. for any innovative product, and you will get all information for conducting clinical trial in France. We have, I mean, just a simple application to the agency and to the ethics committee. You, of course, also can get tax credit for clinical research you do in France. Regarding in vitro diagnosis, I'm not sure I fully understood the question. What I can tell you is that France has just decided to centralize all the database we have on medical claim. So through this centralization, you would be able very soon to better understand the patient pathway today, and therefore identify where, you know, a new diagnosis could help, you know, cutting corner and making the patient pathway more efficient, which certainly would be an important information when you ask for reimbursement of your innovation.
Thank you very much. Are there anyone to add?
If I may, just shortly. Thank you very much. Also in Belgium, we have 12 academic hospitals in a small region, so it makes it very easy to recruit fast patients for your clinical trial. And maybe some of you know the American company CSM. They are specialized in the organization of the logistics relating to clinical trials. And they have an office in Belgium which operates clinical trials all over Europe. Also, our federal agency for the medicines is very efficient in handling the clinical trial procedures.
Thank you very much. Very informative. The next question we had is the Korean companies would like to know details on policies and incentives for exporting and the manufacturing the investigational drug or investigational diagnostics from your country to other countries in Europe. Who can answer the question?
I'm happy to take it. I think, as Jérôme was mentioning, there is a strong focus on bioproduction in France today, with a strong willingness of the government to support location of biomanufacturing. I would hope it's quite easy to get information on the different support. You have, as you could realize today, quite an active representation of France in Korea, both in terms of authorities, but also entrepreneurs through the Club Santé. And France Biotech, as you realize, is a very collaborative organization. So we would be more than welcome to strengthen our relation with Korea Bio and advise, share our experience with your membership.
Okay. There are also a question about the Innovative Medicine Initiative. It's a joint effort among the European Commission and also across the industry, government, and the academia. So we actually wanted to learn from the IMI initiative. For me, I was very interested in the one of the program of IMI, the EHR for CR. So you share the electronic health record to be accessed by biopharmaceutical companies. So I would like to ask all of you, as the individual member state of European Commission, what is individual countries' expectation towards the in relation to the participation in IMI, and what kind of contribution you are made making to the IMI? From Belgium, please.
May I pass the word to our ambassador, Mr. Gsk?
No, let's go ahead.
Okay. So, Belgium is a member state of the European Union, and therefore we totally support the Innovative Medicine Initiative. And by the way, the program office of the Innovative Medicine Initiative is located in Brussels, in Belgium. And yesterday I had a quick look at the website of the EMI, and you can search by keywords. And I saw that there are so many companies also from Belgium participating. As you know, the whole program is funded by member states, and it's a public-private partnership, also including contributions from companies. And for example, I saw that there is an interesting project relating to blockchain, how to use the blockchain technology in the supply chain of the pharmaceutical industries. But about your specific question relating to keeping the records of the patients, I cannot really answer. Maybe somebody else.
My question is really, especially on the country's actually motivation to actively participate in the IMI from industry point of view. Shall I move to Germany?
Yes, I'd like to. Yeah, for Germany, initiatives like the IMI to discover new and innovative medical solutions are really important, because this translational research in the biotech and pharma field is basically at the crossroads of three important elements in Germany. First, there's the academic research. Germany has a really high academic research output in biotechnology. I think it's got the third highest H factor in that field worldwide. Secondly, there is traditionally a large pharma sector, Europe's biggest pharmaceutical industry, traditional pharma companies like Bayer and BI. And thirdly, of course, Germany has a large and especially aging population. So for us, the solution to medical problems is particularly urgent. And what's important about programs such as IMI is that this is basically the link or the hinge between these three elements that enables medical innovation to be pushed from the from academic development, academic research, to the pharma and biotech industry, and then to the patients who need it. So this, I suppose, the contribution that Germany makes here to the European Union in general, and the IMI program in particular, is really a good investment. And I was happy to see that German companies and researchers and universities were also quite heavily involved in this program. I think 172 partners from Germany took place. I've seen a lot of interesting projects, for example, for the development of COVID-19 therapeutics. And there's also one, for example, iConsensus for cell culture and bioproduction, also a very important topic for the future. I've seen large companies from Germany involved in it, and also smaller ones and universities involved in it. And I was also happy to see that in the projects with German participation, you could also see a strong international connection to other countries, other European countries that took place in these research projects too. So I think this is a really exciting initiative.
Thank you. We have 7 minutes left. I have specific questions for Belgium and Australia. So I will focus on 2 questions for the 7 minutes we have. For Belgium, the medical clusters in Belgium are popular among the Korean biotech companies, and that their interest is how they could be the member of the medical clusters if it's allowed to join, and how they could be part of the medical cluster and also the support and services available for the medical clusters in Belgium.
Thank you very much. Of course, the Korean companies, they can also always contact our office in the embassy in Seoul if they want to have information about different projects that are being organized by the clusters in Belgium. And actually one of the clusters is called BioWin, and they are very eager to interact also with Korean organizations. They are already doing that partially. I don't know if you can become a member of the Belgian cluster if you don't have an establishment in Belgium, but we can certainly look at it and see what kind of information the company is interested in. I would like also to stress one thing. Actually, the clusters, they are very interesting for SMEs. And when we see how the SMEs developed in Belgium, we see that the importance of the universities. So for example, maybe you remember from the slides which I showed in the beginning of the meeting, a list of companies that received investment recently. Actually, many of these companies, they were spin-offs from universities. So this means that the clusters like BioWin, they are important because they create a dynamics within the industry, which includes also those universities where there are so many spin-offs for the life science industry. I don't know if this answers your question, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My last question goes to Julie for Australia. These days, many Korean companies go to Australia for their early phase clinical trial, like phase 1 trials. So you already explained why Australia, especially for those clinical trials. Could you add some more points? The point you would like to stress for the companies who are planning early phase trials in Australia?
Yes, Dr. Chi. Well, as you saw in my presentation, Australia has virtually zero cases of COVID at the moment. And so we have been very much open for business for clinical trials where other countries have really had to stop, or hospitals or networks have had to stop. So we really are open. So please, we do encourage people to come. But while I've mentioned the incentives, I'd also like to say we've also been innovating during COVID with remote monitoring, with other ways of delivering clinical trials so that we can still deliver in remote populations or if there are any issues or outbreaks. Something that I didn't mention, hasn't really been mentioned here, we also have really strong, coming back to the in vitro diagnostics, we have a lot of great diagnostics capability that augments the clinical trials. Imaging in particular is really strong in Australia. In neuroscience, we have a specialist neuroscience clinical trials company. We are very strong in ophthalmology in Australia, very strong research institutes there. And so it's not only coming to do a clinical trial and injecting a few patients, you actually get a full range of expertise, not only in clinical areas, but in diagnostics and other areas. Genomics is another area we're very strong in if your business is in precision medicine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have several questions left from the Korean companies, but I would like to stop here because of time constraint. And I would like to thank you all of the speakers today and also the panels who willingly present and explain the countries, the initiatives, and also the update on the COVID responses. was very informative, and actually the Korean companies would have more interest in going Europe and Australia. So thank you very much for sharing your time from your very busy schedule, especially the ambassador. Thank you very much. So I would like to thank you, the organizer of this seminar, and audiences who participate in this seminar and the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.